Deron Smallcomb is an immigration attorney. He's here to give us more insight into the actual asylum process. So if our border is closed, where are these asylum seekers supposed to go?
Well, our border really isn't closed at the end of the day, Chris. A lot of this is talk, and it's not really how it works. So when somebody closes the border, and if it conflicts with federal law, the border doesn't actually close. So we heard a lot today about this executive order where it's closed. What that doesn't affect is the 1,450 people that could schedule an appointment at the border every single day through the CBP One app, right? So that effectively makes our border not closed.
But what about essentially what the president is saying is that once we reach the 2,500 mark, then those who are caught sneaking into our country illegally and they show up to Border Patrol and they say, hey, I'm here to seek asylum, they do what with those people?
Pretty much the same thing that they've been doing. So we had another president just recently that did the same thing. He made a policy where if you were caught crossing the border, not at a port of entry, that you weren't eligible for asylum. And he used the same exact law that President Biden is using today, which is called 221F. That was struck down on a federal appeals court. And the ACLU has already signaled that they will be challenging that as well. So what are they going to do at the end of the day? Probably not a lot different because they've carved out a couple of exceptions, okay? There's some humanitarian exceptions. So if you're traveling with children, for example, they're not going to turn you away, okay? Once you're on U.S. soil, the law states that if you claim asylum, you are afforded an interview, and if you pass the interview, a hearing. This is federal law. No executive order could overrule that.
One thing you pointed out is Trump's controversial Remain in Mexico policy.
Right.
Doesn't this feel a lot like that, or am I wrong?
It's similar. It's similar. So we had an agreement there where if somebody was claiming asylum, we would honor the claim, but they had to remain in Mexico, which again contravenes the federal law that's never changed under Title VIII, which says if you claim asylum, you're afforded a hearing, right? And so this was different. This is similar in that regard, in that they're trying to keep people out, but effectively, I don't understand how they're going to enforce it at the end of the day.
What's the main reason that people are seeking asylum, and what's the criteria for that?
Asylum criteria at its heart is one of the fundamental things I think that our country was founded on, right? Which is the right to speak your mind, the First Amendment, right? The freedom of religion, race, we don't discriminate on. We don't discriminate on nationality, your political opinion, or membership in a certain social group. These things are at the heart, I think, of our country and its founding, and they represent something that I think almost all Americans could agree with, because quite frankly, when we founded this country from England, we came over so we could practice our religion, say what we want, no matter what the crown said. And these things still exist today. The problem is, Chris, is that a lot of the people that are coming over don't belong to those 5 categories. They're economic migrants. And while I could sympathize with them as economic migrants, it kind of dilutes the water, if you will, for the people that are claiming asylum that have a valid claim.
You know, the Border Patrol, I've been down there a lot in my 25-year career in TV news. The Border Patrol tells me that these migrants come over and they know exactly what to say. Sure. They all say the same thing, I'm seeking asylum, right? And then they see that as a free ticket, if you will, and they're in our country. And as the Border Patrol, you just heard them tell me that they get their, they're not doing court for months, even years later at some point. You can confirm that, right?
Sure.
So can't you see why so many Americans are just fired up and have issues with this? I mean, again, absolutely. I know you're an immigration attorney, but do you see that?
I am an immigration attorney, and so I do sympathize with those that have true claims. However, what's happening now, you're right. They come to the border, say, I'm afraid for my life, I want to claim asylum. Then there's no methodology then to process them at that time, right? So when you're swarmed with 10,000 people per day, how do you give them an interview? They don't have a mechanism to do that. And so they're forced to just say, okay, we're gonna let you go and you need to show up here at some future date and time. And as most of us know, they're not showing up.
So what's the answer?
What's the answer? You have to have some processing at the border, quite frankly. We should honor true asylum claims. That's the American way. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. But you need to have interviewers that are qualified right then and there. Yeah. And if they disagree with the decision, then there needs to be a judge that could hear their claims right then and there, represented, of course, and make a decision within a 24 to 48-hour period. This is doable. And once people understand that they're going to be scrutinized immediately when they make this claim of asylum, it will also be a deterrent for those that don't have valid claims.
All right, Deron, thank you so much for your time and your insight tonight. We should point out that Biden's new border policy will stop illegal crossings, but legal asylum claims, as we just pointed out, will still be processed at the ports of entry, and unaccompanied minors will not be affected.